So today I want to talk about my board setup. So a lot of you guys may know, but I used to skate an 8/3/8 size board on 149 standard Indy hollows with the standard base plate and the hollow kingpin and axle. And I was on 53mm conical full Spitfire wheels, and I was on Bronson bearings. And I was on that setup for, I want to say almost a year. I was skating that setup, and I was on an 8.5 before that. And before that, I was actually on 144s in an 8/3/8. So in this setup, I've gone down quite a few sizes in basically all of the setup. And it's not too unfamiliar to me because I have skated something similar in the past. But I remember back in the day, so when I first started skating, I was probably like on a 7.5-inch board, and then eventually graduated to a 7.75-inch board, which is pretty much the norm back then when I was kind of skating as a young teenager. And I actually specifically remember this. A buddy of mine growing up skating, his name was Dean, his older brother Miles had an 8-inch board, and that was the first time I had ever seen an 8-inch board, and I was just like completely blown away. I didn't realize that they even made that size. And I remember specifically that he could do hard flips on it, and I was just blown away. And it's just so funny how, like, you know, the time goes on and now we're all skating a lot larger boards, and it's kind of the norm. So the reason why I set this up, well, one, because Ben inspired me because he's been on a smaller board. But yeah, thanks to Ben, he hooked me up with one of his old hand-me-downs. It's an 8-inch board from CanadaSkateShop.com and on Indy Mids. So for the longest time, I was on Indy Standards. So this is the first time skating Indy Mids. And one of the first things that I noticed is that the timing was a lot quicker. But let's measure it to get a little more specific here. 8-inch board, let's measure the back truck from width to width. Oh, you can't see it. This is kind of hard to measure backwards. If you guys can see that, it reads 8-inch. Let's look at the nose as well, 8-inch. Let's look a little higher, like right when it tapers. So it's actually like slightly, it's like 7/8 or 7, I don't know. I'm not good at measuring. I don't actually understand how to properly read measuring tape in inches. But let's measure the length here, just from nose to tail. It's 31 3/4. So a little bit of shorter board, but let's measure the wheelbase. So a lot of you have probably heard the term wheelbase, and maybe you don't even know where to begin when measuring it, but it's pretty simple. You're gonna measure from the bottom bolts to the bottom bolts of your trucks here. So the inside bolts, essentially, right?
How we measure wheelbase on skateboards is from the center of these back bolts to the center of these bolts. So the holes on your board, inside to inside, the centers of them. That's how it's measured.
Right? So this reads out to 14.25 inches. If we're comparing that to like most boards out there, that's a pretty standard wheelbase. And it's actually the wheelbase that I prefer the most. It makes the most sense to me. When I've skated a 14-inch wheelbase, I found that I've had to adjust my foot placing quite a bit. I had to put my foot lower for most tricks because the timing is just completely different, right? And obviously it's dependent on the trucks that you have, but I mainly skate indies, so for me, a 14-inch wheelbase just feels way too short. I think the highest that I'd like to go up is 14.5, but even at that, it's just a little too long. I actually prefer 14.25. It's like my ideal setup. And with the Indy Mids that I have going on here, which are the 144 Indy Mids, also nicknamed Mindies, I'm actually really enjoying these. So basically what these feel like is very similar to a standard Indy. If you're used to regular Indies, they're not gonna feel much different, but they might help you with your flip tricks or your pop if you're struggling to get a good ollie or nollie. So when I say you're struggling, meaning it's taking too long for your board to make contact on the ground. So maybe you're just like going to ollie and it's not even hitting, or you're going to nollie and it's not even hitting. Indy Mids might help you with that. And if that doesn't solve the issue, then I'd go for something like a Venture or a Thunder, where it's gonna hit a lot quicker because they're lower to the ground, right? So what else do I have going on here? I have 52mm Formula 4 Classics. Probably one of my favorite wheels. I mean, you just can't go wrong with this wheel. It just, you know, it's good on most every surface. Like I said earlier, I was on a conical full before this, and I found, especially in the beginning, I actually struggled to do flip tricks because you are more sturdy. There's less kind of play back and forth on the ground, which makes it less tippy for flip tricks. And when you're doing flip tricks, you kind of want that tippiness, if that makes sense. But it doesn't take long to get used to it and kind of figure it out. And it did provide more stability and actually helped with lock-ins on rails. But it's one of those things where like, it doesn't really matter what setup you set up, you're gonna get used to it and adjust to it. One thing that I do find kind of annoying with going down to an 8-inch setup, and this just might only kind of happen because I have a size 11 foot, and I'm sure a lot of you guys out there who have an 8-inch board or smaller have experienced this. If you do have a larger foot, you do have to be a lot more precise in where you put your feet before doing a trick. So especially on slides. So for a no slide, for example, the first few goes, my foot would just be completely hanging off the heel, and my heel would just drag on the ledge, or my toe is too far forward, so my toe would hit and I would get pitched forward. So for slides and even for flip tricks, when I was on my 838 board, I would do the flip trick and I had a lot more room to land on the board. So basically, if I flipped a kind of a sketchy one, there was a lot more room for me to still catch it and put it down. Whereas on the 8-inch board, if I'm not precise with where I'm catching the board, I have less of a chance of landing it if it's a sketchy kind of catch, if that makes sense. Which is good and bad, right? It's good in the sense that it makes you hone in a lot more and you have to be a lot more precise and technical. So that is a bit of a challenge. I'm honestly really enjoying this 8-inch board, and I'll probably skate it to full completion because I don't like to waste boards. I mean, full completion for me is only like 3 weeks or so of skating, then I'll tend to give it to somebody because it still has a lot of life left. The next board I'm actually going to set up is an 825, and I'll show you that in a second. Well, let's look at what else is going on here. So with the Indy mids, they actually have an inverted kingpin here, which is kind of cool because it basically is meant to give you a bit more clearance, but it doesn't seem like much. And you can also tighten your trucks with either an Allen key or your regular kind of like skate tool. I'm also on independent hardware. I like the Phillips heads or the Star heads because I always have a screwdriver on me. I also like using gold bolts. It's also kind of like an indicator letting me know which one my nose is. And in the past I used to put 2 on top, but now I'm kind of did a crisscross. So like gold here, gold here. Sticker job, I got a Menu sticker. Menu's a local skate shop here in Vancouver, and I often buy my boards from there. That's mainly what I've been skating unless I get given a board. And then I got a Quantum sticker here and a Spitfire. So actually Ben put these on. He had already skated this board when he gave it to me, and same with the Indies. That's why they're already kind of worn in here. I mean, only skated a few times really. And the bearings are Quantum, I think the Adams, which are like all the black ones. Let's measure the tail and nose out of curiosity here. The nose is measuring 7 inches, just a little over 7 inches, like 7 inch and a hair. Would that be like 1/8? I don't know, comment below guys, I don't know inches. Let's measure the tail. That was the nose, 7 inch and a bit. The tail is 6.5 essentially. So I actually really quite enjoy this board, and I would definitely skate it again. But seeing as I have an 11 size foot, I think an 825 would be a little more ideal for me, where it wouldn't feel that much bigger, still feel like a fun kind of toy, get technical on, but give me a little bit more board room for my big feet. So the next board I'm gonna set up here is this 825. It is a Julio De La Cruz board, pressed by Paul Schmidt at PS Sticks. So it's an 825. Here's the graphic. Thank you, Ben, for hooking it up. I'm excited to set this one up. I think I'm gonna really like it. It's got like a pretty blunt nose, quite large. The concave is pretty mellow, medium, and the tail is kind of like a decent size as well. But yeah, nice setup. Let's take some measurements here. So it's the same length as the 8-inch board. It's 31 3/4, and the wheelbase is 14 1/4. So this is like my ideal wheelbase, 14 1/4, 825. It's actually a hair under 825, so it's closer to like an 8125. But it's funny because it feels, or rather looking down at it, it feels like it's a lot wider. But maybe that's just because it has a pretty big nose. Yeah, pretty cool graphic. I mean, honestly, I'm not too fussed when it comes to graphics, especially when it's a board that I'm not buying and being given. I'm always grateful to be receiving boards. I'm excited to set this one up. Should I grip it? Should I grip it right now? Grip it and then leave it in the car, and then that way I have a setup ready to go in case I break that 8-inch board. It's not a bad idea. Let me get the grip tape. All right, let's try and redeem myself, because the last time I set up grip on video, I don't know if you guys remember, it was probably like a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. The last time I set it up, I actually cut myself. So let's try and redeem myself and set this up properly. Try and get some sound of this too. It's an ASMR. Satisfying. I use Jessup grip. That's kind of my preferred go-to grip here. The reason why I like Jessup, and a lot of people hate on Jessup, and to be honest, I think it's just like a thing that people just started saying. They're like, oh, Jessup is not grippy. But honestly, I have not really found a huge difference. Sure, Mob is a little bit grippier, but it does have drawbacks in the way that it'll kind of like tear up your thumb. My thumb actually looks decent right now, but if I do skate quite a few sessions, like back-to-back sessions, I find that my thumb gets pretty beat up and even like might even start bleeding. Another thing I noticed with Mob is in the winter, so if you live in Canada or you live somewhere that's cold, the glue doesn't tend to work that well in winter conditions. So I've had many boards that the grip tape literally just peels off halfway through the use of the board, or within the first session it just starts to peel off, and it's really not ideal. So I go with Jessup. I actually bought a whole roll on Amazon. I think it was like $70-something. That way I'm always sure to have grip. Sometimes you get boards hooked up or you get a board without grip, and it's just nice to have sheets of grip lying around. That way you can, you know, hook friends up too if they need. Because I'm inside, I don't want to get a bunch of grip tape trimmings on the ground. I normally will scrape the edges to know where the line is, but I think I'm gonna just try this technique because a lot of people do this. They don't even scrape it. They just go straight into this part. And I'm pretty bad normally at this, to be honest, but let's give it my best effort. I find it helps if you're getting like caught up. Make sure to kind of peel this up a bit. That way it's not getting stuck. See if we can make this in one rotation. Oh my God, I'm already butchering it, guys. I don't even know if you could see this. Hopefully the camera is picking up on this angle here. So funny enough, when I was kind of growing up skating as a kid, I never gripped my own boards because like I would just have the skate shops do it for me because they grip your board for free, so might as well take advantage of that service. And a lot of times the dudes behind the desk, they're gripping, so many boards in a day. They're just really good at it, so leave it up to the pros. But now I grip my own boards. We'll do a rating score after I'm done. We'll rate my job out of 10. It's actually more difficult, I find, not having the guide. When I say the guide, not having like I said, I'll scrape it with my silver tool so that I see where the edge of the board is and that you can kind of follow that line. Whereas this is just a little more difficult to figure out. You still have a guide in the sense that you can kind of use the edge of the board as your guide to go around. We're making it work. Boom. I love when that works out. You get this one complete sheet. So normally I would sand the corners, clean it up a bit so that it's, I find it just helps it not peel up and stick. You're kind of think of it like sealing the outside so it stays. But yeah, pretty bad job. If you look here, missed some there. If you look here, I missed some there. I give this like a 5 out of 10. This is probably one of my worst jobs in a while. Normally I do pretty good, but this is pretty bad. It'll be nice to have a backup board in the car ready to go, already gripped. Yeah, if I break the board or if I'm just kind of over it and find someone that I want to give it to, I know that I'll have the backup in the car. Yeah, that's it. That's my board setup.